All it takes is finding one small commonality between another person where they might feel like they're ready to open up, and you have no idea the impact that that might make on that person. And if you are that person that's listening, that, you are feeling like, I'm not in the group. Like all of these people feel like they're friends with each other. That's actually just not true. We all are just used to making friends like so fast because we have to. And we welcome more people immediately. So do not feel discouraged to step out or attend something that you've never been to. Reach out to your Key Spouse. Every single branch has a version of the Key Spouse program.
Welcome to the Military Money Manual Podcast, where every episode is all about achieving financial independence in the military faster than before. We believe personal finance shouldn't be boring or intimidating. Building wealth can be simple, and financial freedom is the ultimate financial goal. Now, here's your hosts, Spencer and Jamie.
Welcome back to the Military Money Manual Podcast. I'm Jamie, the co-host, and I'm here today with Spencer, the other co-host and owner of militarymoneymanual.com. Today, we're joined as special guest Miranda Head, a military spouse, Air Force spouse, and her husband's now a reservist. And today, we're going to talk about all things spouse employment, what to do during resume gaps, how to find your new job, how to handle the stereotypes of military spouses moving all the time and people not wanting to hire you, and how to network and leverage tools like LinkedIn to help you land the best job for you and your situation. So Miranda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Jamie. Hey, Spencer. Thank you for having me on. I'm happy to be here.
All right, Miranda, you started as a kindergarten teacher or elementary school teacher?
I did. I started as a 4th grade teacher, and I did something called Teach for America. I chose teaching because I knew it would be an easier job to pursue because of all the moves you would have to make in the military. And very quickly, I got kind of burnt out with the education system, and I knew that I could not stay as a teacher. So I left teaching after about 5 years.
And you were able to find a new career, kind of started with freelance social media stuff that led to friends and networks that took you from a stay-at-home mom for a few years to landing jobs at some pretty big companies.
Yeah. No, so after teaching, I actually got into a sales role, a very entry-level sales role. And it was great experience, actually having a huge career pivot from education to anything else. I was lucky that I was in a situation where I wasn't solely relying on my income, right? Like I had my husband and who's in the military who had a very steady income. So I was able to take kind of a pay cut and go into the very entry-level sales role. But that's what got me into what corporate America is kind of like. And if anyone has never had a job in sales, I highly recommend it. It doesn't have to be at a massive Fortune 500 company. It could just be working as a cashier, but having sales is a really integral foundational step into anyone looking to broaden their career and growth. So I started as a entry-level sales role, and I did that for about a year. After that, I had my first son, and that's when I decided, hey, I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom. I don't need to work. I was very lucky to have, again, that other income. And we were also moving to Hawaii. So it was okay, there's not a lot of job opportunities in Hawaii. I have a newborn, or I have a 1-year-old at this point. So I'm not going to go after and look for a career. I'm good where I am. About a year into it, I was like, you know what? I don't think stay-at-home mom life strictly is just for me. I need to do something else. And that's when I was leveraging all of my network to see what can I do when my son is taking a nap and I have a couple hours on my hand. I'd love to get back into the working world. So that's when I started leveraging my military spouse network, honestly, to see what's out there. What can I do in my free time?
I'm sure there's a lot of listeners who either they're the spouse themselves or their service member spouse, and they're maybe at a stage where they're in a season of stay-at-home parenting and they're maybe looking to get back into the market. Did you ever have anxiety about this time of, I was just a stay-at-home mom or something like that, that some of you might have that persona placed on yourself?
Yeah, totally. That feeling is so real. That is such a real feeling where you just, you're like, well, what is little old me going to do here? And that's Honestly, I remember the first thing I did was I went to LinkedIn and I posted for like the first time. I said, "Hi, I'm looking to become a virtual assistant for someone. If anyone has any recommendations, let me know." And I was not really using LinkedIn very much. I didn't have like a robust network at the time, but somehow like the feed, maybe it was like keywords of virtual assistant, ended up getting me into the network of people who were looking for virtual assistants.
Wow.
And I think that me just like asking the universe, hey, what's out there, really helped me combat that feeling of, well, what can I do? I was just a stay-at-home mom. Because if you don't even put yourself out there, then you're not going to get anything.
So I want to continue your story there, Miranda. So stay-at-home mom, sales role, and then where did you go after that?
Yeah, so I was a stay-at-home mom after the sales role for about a year. And that's when I was like, I need to do something else. I put that post out on LinkedIn. I got connected with someone who was looking for a virtual assistant. I spent about 6 months being his virtual assistant, which was a lot of like LinkedIn help for him, sourcing and finding leads. And it kind of married my skills from sales, my very entry level skills, don't get me wrong. And after that point, when we were in Hawaii, it was a very sad situation. The guy that I had met who I was working for, he ended up having like almost a widowmaker heart attack. And obviously like he had to slow down. So here I was back to kind of square one. By the way, he's healthy. He's good now. So, but I was back to square one and we were in Hawaii and it was like, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I really just started making sure when I was at military spouse events that the squadrons would put on, I would always kind of ask people like, hey, what do you guys do in your spare time? Because a lot of us, we're in the same boat. We're living in Hawaii. A lot of us just moved there. It's a totally different world of living. If you've ever lived on an island, it's totally different. It can be isolating. So you have to like leverage your network, not only just for your career if you want, but your personal health, your personal mental health. You cannot stay isolated just within your family. And I think that's probably true at most bases. But I just remember one lady in one of our spouse get-togethers saying she was the COO of a company. And I was like, how are you doing that in Hawaii? And she was like, oh, it's completely remote. And I was like, wow, and this is pre-COVID. So it was like, those opportunities are rare. And I just kept keeping tabs. She posted one day in our military spouse Facebook group for our squadron, hey, does anyone want to work a few hours a week? Here's the pay rate. This is what you'd be doing. And I immediately texted her and I was like, let's talk.
So the network like saved the day and just putting it out there that you were looking for opportunities and not just like sitting there thinking, oh, woe is me. I'm stuck here. I don't have any friends. I don't have any jobs. I've been a stay-at-home mom. You're just asking for opportunities, looking for opportunities, and something kind of came up from that. That's awesome.
You never know when you're at these squadron events. There's so many family get-togethers with squadrons. And that's what I kind of miss that a lot now that we're in the reservist side. But if you are in the situation of active duty and you have these events at your disposal, sometimes I know it's hard to like put yourself out there. But if you do go, like you've already decided with your husband or your partner, you're going, make a goal to yourself. I'm going to connect with 3 people that I don't know. And I'm going to find out what they are doing. Because you never know. It couldn't just be like maybe for career. It could be, oh, your kids are the same age. Like, let's set up a play date. That's my recommendation.
Do you find in the military spouse community, there are mental health challenges and identity crises where sometimes the spouse might be coming from a high performance career and all of a sudden now they've moved to Okinawa, they moved to Hawaii or to Ramstein, Germany, and they're following the active duty military service member and they have to give up their career because they can't do it remotely. Do you find that there's a big gap there between the people who can like hold on to those remote jobs and the people who have to give up their careers?
Yeah, I mean, definitely pre-COVID, for sure. I also think a lot of military spouses like me did not pick a career path that would, help them like I said at the beginning of this podcast, I chose to be a teacher because I knew I would be able to find a job anywhere we moved. And I think a lot of military spouses do think that way. Like, oh, well, I just need a career that, will be flexible when my husband's deployed. And yes, 100%, you need a career like that. But I think that if you're still thinking that way in 2023, then that can be a downfall because there are so many opportunities now in the working world where you don't even have to go meet your employer. I haven't met my manager, and I've had 4 different jobs in the last 5 years. I haven't met a single one of those managers. And that has not limited me in one way, shape, or form.
So, Miranda, getting back into the workplace after periods of being a stay-at-home mom or looking for a new job, or let's say you go back to school for a little bit, you mentioned earlier about reaching out on LinkedIn, and a lot of times in TAPS or transition programs, they talk about making sure your LinkedIn's accurate and they help people learn how to phrase the right things of their military experience translated into civilian kind of speak. What do you do with something like a resume gap if you've been a stay-at-home mom for 5 or 15 years even to be marketable out there?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, something really interesting on LinkedIn is they've launched a new update to your profile where you can put on your profile in your experience, your career experience, that you've had a resume gap. And you can say exactly what that gap was for. Like you decided to be a full-time stay-at-home parent, or you took a gap year, or you were deployed, which obviously isn't a resume gap, or anything that's happening. And in that section on your LinkedIn profile, you can explain what you were doing during that time. So first, I would definitely leverage that tool on LinkedIn. Second, use that time to, like I said, network with other people. There's a bunch of groups. There's a bunch of groups on Facebook and LinkedIn where people are in the same boat as yourself. And just join those groups, find those groups, make sure you are keeping up to date with how the working world is progressing, and then hone your skills and passions. Something I did that I will attribute to my success now is when I had that stint in Hawaii a few years ago where I wasn't full-time working for a company, but I was doing part-time work, freelance social media work. I was honing my skills as a creator on TikTok. And I spent, a lot of my free time creating great content to put on TikTok. I kind of amassed a little following there. And it wasn't just for a vanity purpose. It was, I wanted to learn what other people were doing. So I thought I needed to do what they were doing. And because of that, I got integrated in this whole other world of creators. And that kind of got me to where I am today. So my point is, when you have a gap and you're maybe you're a stay-at-home mom and you're stuck in it every day and you're just waiting for your partner to come home from a mission or whatever, there are things you can be doing to fill up that time that you'll never know where it leads you in a year or two.
I think that's a great point. And Miranda, in 2023, with the resume gaps, do employers really care, do you think? Or do you think COVID kind of broke the system where, if you say, I traveled for 2 years or I looked after my family for 2 years, and most employers are like, great, that sounds like you took care of what's important.
Yeah, I honestly, in my experience, and I've had a lot of different jobs in the last 13 years, I have never been approached with the question of well, what were you doing? Were you sitting on your butt for 2 years? I don't think that question can ever really get asked if you are properly positioning yourself in the interview. If you lead off with, here are my skills. Here's what I have done to hone those skills. Here's what I've learned along the way. Then that's what the conversation becomes. It doesn't become this timeline interrogation. So I truly don't think that's ever an issue as long as you are the one owning the interview and controlling the narrative.
You're making yourself better. You're not just being a victim of the situation. You're taking ownership of that period. I really like the way you phrase that.
Right.
Miranda, have you ever seen other military spouses, or have you yourself ever heard of this where you kind of have to hide the fact that you are a military spouse when you're applying for a job?
Yes. Actually, this is literally something I did all the time. I remember when I left teaching and I was trying to find a new career, I interviewed at probably 6 or 7 different companies in Charleston. That's where we used to live. And I remember them asking, obviously, employers cannot ask that question, but people are people and people make mistakes. And sometimes in conversation, it just comes up because you're human. And I remember, I'll never forget, like preparing for these interviews. And I remember chatting with my girlfriends who were other military spouses who were in the same boat as me. We would just be like, okay, how are you going to skirt around the question of like what your husband does? How are you going to skirt around the question of why do you guys live in Charleston, or what brought you to Charleston? Like, what are you going to say where it's not a lie? And I just laugh looking back on that.
What would you say to Miranda, 5 years ago when you were living in Charleston, or to, a current military spouse? Like, do you think, again, now that remote work is such a thing, do you think that's still a thing that military spouses have to hide? Or would you say just be honest, and if it's not right for that job or for that company, then that's you probably don't want to work there anyways. Like any place, in my mind, any place that's going to discriminate against a military spouse is not a place I want to work anyways.
Right. It's definitely a little bit of all the above. I think that the main thing to remember is you control your interview. You control the tone you set of your skills and what you bring to the table. And if you have this like mentality of like, oh my gosh, they're not going to take me because I'm a military spouse, that's going to eat away at your confidence in an interview. Second thing on that is you do need to be confident in the fact that an employer must accept my lifestyle. Times have changed a lot where companies really do consider their employees and their employees' well-being. So you have to make sure they understand like what your limitations are and what's going on without you coming across as brash or forthcoming of like, well, you have to make sure that I can take this time off because of the deployment or whatever. I truly feel like if you bring your full self to the table and you are showing up as someone who is strong, can get the work done, then the military spouse life is a non-issue for them, and it should be. And they should bend over backwards to help support your life if you are providing great work to the company. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Just a quick note from one of our sponsors, and then we'll be right back to the show. If you're interested in learning more about military travel hacking, pay attention. I created a 100% free course, the Ultimate Military Credit Cards course, to show you how to get premium luxury travel rewards credit cards and pay no annual fees. You can sign up right now at militarymoneymanual.com/UMC3, and I'll send you the first day of the course immediately.
We're talking about cards like the Platinum Card from American Express, the Chase Sapphire Reserve Card, and luxury hotel credit cards like the American Express Hilton Honors Aspire Card.
The Ultimate Military Credit Cards course is 100% free to you. I explain how to verify your eligibility for annual fee waivers with the Military Lending Act, or MLA. I've run the course for over 5 years now, and we just celebrated our 10,000th graduate. Our graduates of the Ultimate Military Credit Card course have saved over $10 million in credit card annual fees. On a personal note, my wife and I receive over $12,000 of annual fee waivers every single year.
The Ultimate Military Credit Cards course is an absolute beginner's guide to travel hacking and opening up your first annual fee waive credit card while you or your spouse is in the military. There's no spam, no fluff. The only emails you'll get from me are related to the credit card course, and you can subscribe at any time, and there's no cost to you. You can sign up for free right now at militarymoneymanual.com/UMC3.
Again, that's militarymoneymanual.com/UMC3. And now back to the show.
Okay, Miranda, so the network was huge for you in the military spouse network, and that eventually got you back into full-time work. Can you talk a little bit about that and then what your journey's been like back in the workplace full-time now?
Yeah, absolutely. I worked as a freelance social media employee for about a year and a half in Hawaii. And a piece of advice is never stop looking for opportunities. I remember I was actually editing a podcast for my employer, and one of the guests he had on was a CEO at a accounting tech company in LA. And I was not looking for a new job. I was very happy where I was, but I decided, we were considering moving to LA after my husband got out of the military. So I thought I would connect him with him on LinkedIn, send him a DM, say, hey, I am editing the podcast you did with my employer. Great job. Your company sounds awesome, which it did. In a few years, we're looking to move back to LA. I will be looking at your company. And he wrote back right away. It's like he didn't even read anything I said about moving to LA in a few years. And he just said, hey, we're actually hiring a full-time social media manager right now. What's your schedule like? And so I was shocked. I was really shocked. Anyway, I did the interview. I got the job. It was now me moving from a contractor to, I could set my own hours, work when my child's sleeping to, oh, by the way, I was 8 months pregnant when I got hired. And I remember walking into that interview. Now here I am, not only worried about military spouse, but I am literally about to have a baby. And that is something you cannot hide. And it was a Zoom interview. Anyway, and we can talk a little about that if you want. But that was a big decision for my family because when I walked into that interview, I actually did not know it was a full-time position. I thought it was going to be a contractor position. And here I am, very pregnant. So when I got the offer and the CEO did say it was full-time, something my husband and I had to decide, okay, we're going to have to get serious childcare now. We're about to have a second kid and it's a baby, right? We're going to need a nanny. We're going to need something. So that was a big moment for us to decide I was going to go into full-time work. And that's what I decided. I worked there for about a year and another opportunity came up to work at LinkedIn. You never say no to an interview or an opportunity. And I was very happy at Flowcast. I loved my job. They were very supportive of me. Obviously, they hired me at 8 months pregnant. It was a great, great company. I loved it. But, here comes LinkedIn. So I had the interview. I got the job there. And now that's where I am today.
So you have to hide that you're a military spouse, hide that you're pregnant and or have kids. There's a lot of barriers that spouses might have to deal with here to finding jobs. But I'm glad that you're an example of how taking ownership of the situation, networking, and continue to make yourself better and more marketable does work out sometimes.
Yeah. And honestly, if employers don't realize a working mom or just a mom in general would not make a good employee, that they can come talk to me.
Miranda, what kind of challenges did you experience when you guys were on active duty, moving around the country, PCSing all the time? And, I guess it's kind of pre-COVID, post-COVID, things changed a lot, but are there any stories or any experiences that you saw or that your friends saw from the military spouse perspective?
Yeah, no, I think moving is so difficult. And so many employers, they don't understand how it just eats up your whole life, right? Your whole world is just discombobulated for sometimes 2 to 3 months, especially a move from Hawaii. The biggest thing that I've experienced was companies, they usually have zones of pay, right? Based on where you live. So Hawaii zone is way different from a zone like New York or San Francisco. And we moved from Hawaii to Oklahoma, which is the lowest pay zone. That's a separate issue, but companies have to do what they have to do. So that's kind of, I don't have any specific guidance or anything that I hear from other people. It's more just you just get through it. And I think all of us in the military understand how much a move is literally the worst thing ever.
And I think that's where the network comes in because only another military family or spouse is truly going to understand most of the time what it takes. Like we had a friend the other day, because we're in the middle of PCSing, full Diddy move overseas. We'll see in a couple weeks whether it was, whether it was worth it or not. But we just had a friend from church, and like they don't really understand the military thing, but they're just like, hey, can we pick up the kids for a few hours? And we're like, yes, like right now.
Nice.
And they came and we're like, take them to the trampoline park and lunch. Here's $40. We'll see you. And they kept for hours, and it was the best thing they could have done for us. A lot of times, the other military families in your network will know that, and they know that when your neighbor moves in, that you need help, and you don't have mustard, and you need butter, and you need friends for the kids.
A lot of the times, though, we're so proud, right? Like we all go through hardships. Like it's so hard sometimes for us to say, "Hey, I need help," and I actually kind of feel like my husband and I feel like that. Like we don't really want to burden other people, but that is like such a huge learning. Like you've got to like ask for help or accept the help. Like don't just say, "Oh, I've got it," because like it really does make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, if they're a true friend, it's not even going to feel like they're doing a favor for you. They're just, no, this is what we do. This is why you have friends, so that when someone's moving house, you can show up and carry a couple boxes out, right? It's not that hard, or look after the kids, like Jamie was saying. One sidebar that I did want to mention, and this was a listener sent this in regards to moving, was there's this new program called the Secretarial Housing Allowance Waiver. And the waiver does not provide for dual housing allowance. However, it allows for a service member who is PCSed or long-term TDY to a different location to keep the higher BAH of the previous permanent duty station. So, for example, let's say that you're at Charleston and you have to go to Maxwell for school for a year. Normally it would be a PCS, but let's say your military spouse has a really good job in Charleston. You could keep the Charleston BAH, move to Maxwell. You'll still be on the hook for paying, rent or a mortgage in both places, but you can keep the higher BAH. You don't have to accept the lower Maxwell BAH. So that's a great change that just came about recently, and all branches are implementing that now. I know the Air Force especially has a great program set up for that, where it's just, talking to finance and submitting a form, and then they'll probably lose the form and you have to submit the form again. But eventually it does work where you can keep the higher BAH. So I did want to mention that program. That's a Secretarial Housing Allowance Waiver. So if you're PCSing, especially like a short, 1 year overseas or 1 year to school, make sure that you look into that.
That's great. Also, while you were talking about that, I remember in Charleston at the FRG, is that the Family Readiness Group? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
They had a program for when you were either PCSing in or PCSing out, that you can get 20 hours of childcare during the move. Not every base has it, because Hawaii did not have it. But I would check your FRG to double check if they have something like that. And we definitely used it.
Yeah. So speaking of childcare, you mentioned going, full time. We have serious childcare. Are there any financial resources to help? Is the CDC our only option? Like, what are we talking about as you guys look through the childcare dilemma?
Oh gosh, childcare. Like someone needs to write a book on military childcare.
Solve it. You'll be a millionaire. Yeah.
So there is a really great program called Childcare Aware that is offered to all the branches. However, there are differences between each branch. I remember in Hawaii, the funding for the Navy side was very depleted versus the Air Force one. So that's why what I'm talking about, what my experience was Air Force, so you'd have to check with your branch. But go to childcareaware.com and read through everything and figure out if you qualify. The chances of you qualifying is probably 50-50, but go ahead and fill it out, reach out to them. They do take a while to respond to you, but they get back to you. But you can get assistance for childcare if you do not have the CDC available to you. So in Hawaii, the CDCs were very full. They had waiting lists of like over a year to get into them. So when I found out I was starting this job, like within a couple months, I could not get into the CDC when I needed to. So Childcare Aware was able to help offset the costs so that I could go to another daycare in my neighborhood that was way more expensive than the CDC, but now I'm only charged the rate that I would have been charged at the CDC.
Yeah, it sounds like a great benefit. That's childcareaware.org, it looks like, and they have that program to help out. That's a great resource because the CDC is hard and there's that prioritization of, dual military spouses, single parents, all
Yes.
those. And so a lot of times if you're just low on the list, or they won't even give you really any feedback on you're on the list, but we don't know when the spot will open up for you. And you can't necessarily just wait until they call you one day. You got to have a plan.
Right. And when you find out you're PCSing, literally like that day, get on the wait list for the CDC at the next base.
Miranda, do you have any advice for military families looking to improve their finances while they're on active duty?
Yes, definitely. Like, I think it's not just saving, but giving yourself a strict budget of here's what I'm going to spend on food, or here's what I'm going to allocate towards fun. If you're just constantly spending your paycheck, or you're just thinking, well, next year my husband will be making a little bit more money, or when he gets out of the military, we're going to be fine. Like, you never know what's going to happen in your life. So no matter what income you're making, always have some kind of percentage of saving that doesn't change, and try really hard to not put things on credit cards. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, definitely would agree with all that. Just a quick note from one of our sponsors, and then we'll be right back to the show. This episode is brought to you by YNAB, Y-N-A-B. YNAB is a personal finance tool that enables you to enjoy guilt-free spending and effortless saving with a friendly, flexible method for managing your finances. You can sign up for a 34-day, 100% free trial, no credit card required, at militarymoneymanual.com/YNAB. We had the founder of YNAB, Jesse Meekum, on the show in episode 58 for one of our all-time favorite episodes. Highly recommend you go listen to that episode and then head over to militarymoneymanual.com/YNAB to sign up for your free trial. Jesse and his team have created the ultimate personal finance system and app.
I've been a YNAB user for over 4 years, and in that time, my net worth has increased substantially by several 100%. I can promise you that your net worth will increase by more than the cost of the annual subscription if you start using this app and using the 4 rules that Jesse Meekum discovered. Rule number 1, give every dollar a job. Rule number 2, embrace your true expenses. Rule number 3, roll with the punches. And rule number 4, age your money.
Whether you're trying to pay off debt, build a better financial relationship with your spouse or partner, save more, or achieve financial freedom, YNAB can help you achieve those goals. Again, you can sign up for a risk-free 34-day trial at militarymoneymanual.com/YNAB. YNAB. Love how you spend your money. Now let's get back to the show.
Okay, so getting a new job at 8 months pregnant, obviously maternity leave was at the forefront of your mind as you got that new job. And probably for a lot of military spouses, if they're battling a similar situation, how do they navigate the need and understanding their employer's rules or what may or may not be available as they move around or take new jobs?
Yeah, maternity leave in the United States is just something that isn't great all around. It completely varies on your situation and the employer. And there is like no way to foreshadow or forecast like what that's going to look like if and when you get pregnant. For me, my situation was so unique, right? Like I was just 8 months pregnant, got this opportunity and got hired. But what I did do is I made sure I understood all options available to me. And I didn't just take what the company told me was going to happen. I asked questions. I looked to see what other companies were doing in the same position. I wanted to make sure that I understood everything I could about maternity leave policies. And if there's any kind of caveats with the military life or being a military spouse or having a husband who could get deployed, like that kind of thing. So what I did when I got hired, instead of getting hired full-time immediately, which meant that I would not have any access to maternity leave because I had been there for like less than a month, right? Like a lot of places you have to be at the company for a year before you get access to maternity leave. I worked out with that company that I would just be brought on as a contractor. And that way I could take as much time as I wanted on my maternity leave and wouldn't be penalized by like the company policies of working full time. So all of that to say, just make sure you know the answers to every situation or scenario that could come up. And I know it's a lot of homework on our part, and we should just be focused on like creating a baby instead of worrying about everything else. But that's the reality. And that's all I can offer on that.
In the Air Force, we have a program called the Key Spouse. I'm sure other branches have something similar, but just an anchor of resources in the unit. And you spent some time doing that at a couple different bases. What are some of the trends that you saw or common questions people had? How can we be a better network to each other, a better friend to the other families in our unit? Anything like that from your experience?
Yeah, I think as a key spouse, you have like a roster that you are responsible for, like checking in on them, making sure that these spouses are doing okay. Like you're kind of the point person in a time of crisis. Like in Charleston, we had a bunch of hurricanes. So anytime there was a hurricane evacuation, a lot of the times the key spouses would check in on everybody else. I think something that was like a trend that I discovered, and it's been a while since I've been a key spouse. I think I stopped after Hawaii, was just you never know what someone is going through. And even though we are all in this like military world and we have a lot of similarities and we understand what each other is going through, you never truly know what's going on in their life. And you might think someone doesn't want to be a part of the network, but that could be not true. Like maybe they just don't know how to insert themselves, or maybe they're more introverted than extroverted. And sometimes that comes across as like they aren't willing to participate. They want nothing to do with the military squadron. But you can't assume that. You just don't know how they're feeling and what they're going through. So always offer a hand, always offer to invite someone to something that maybe you've never seen them at. Say, hey, I'd really love for you to be there. I know we haven't gotten to hang out before, but you should check this out. There's going to be free food. Like our kids are the same age, whatever it is, whatever it takes. All it takes is finding one small commonality between another person where they might feel like they're ready to open up, and you have no idea the impact that that might make on that person. And if you are that person that's listening, that, you know, you are feeling like, you know, I'm not in the group. Like all of these people feel like they're friends with each other. That's actually just not true. We all are just used to making friends like so fast because we have to. And we welcome more people immediately. So do not feel discouraged to like step out or attend something that you've never been to. Reach out to your key spouse. Every single branch has a version of the key spouse program, and that's what they are there for.
I think while we're talking about military spouse employment, Miranda, another good program to mention is the Military Spouse Licensure Reimbursement Program, which provides up to $1,000 for a military spouse to convert their licenses from one state to another. It's an excellent program. All branches have implemented it. They all have different programs. So if you go back and listen to episode 66 of the Military Money Manual podcast, you can learn more about that program. And also, if you Google it, Military One Source and my website, militarymoneymanual.com, have a lot more on that topic.
Okay, we heard a lot of great tips today. And one of the ones I think that kept coming up is how to use the tools on LinkedIn for your resume and networking opportunities to find your next career. And there's also some learning on there. So can you give us an overview of what's available on LinkedIn and what military families have access to and how they should use it?
Yes. LinkedIn has a whole program department dedicated to military veterans, military spouses. If you literally just Google LinkedIn for veterans or LinkedIn for military spouses, the first site that pops up is the dedicated page for all the resources you have at LinkedIn. But one of the biggest resources is you actually get premium for free for 1 year for active duty members who are transitioning out of the military, and for military spouses who are, anytime you are moving or PCSing, you get that 1 year freebie.
With every PCS, you
yes,
get it another year. Wow.
Yes, every PCS, because military spouses have to change jobs a lot because of their move. So for active duty, though, it's just when you're getting out that first year. For military spouses, anytime you are moving and transitioning out. It's very easy to get access to it. Again, go to like Google, LinkedIn for military spouses. I actually did use that service several years ago before I was even hired at LinkedIn. So
Wow.
I
That's
highly
cool.
recommend it. And what does premium get you? It actually unlocks a lot of neat analytics and tools on your profile, but it gets you access to LinkedIn learning courses. And there are courses that are specifically designed for active duty getting out of military service. And there is one specifically dedicated for military spouses called Get Ahead as a Military Spouse. So highly recommend everyone take on that resource. And then use LinkedIn every day. DM, connect with people that might be working in a company that you are interested in. Reach out to other military members or people who are helping the military community on LinkedIn. There's actually so many of them. And I don't know if you guys you send out resources on your website from the episode, but I've linked 3 people that I actually worked with under LinkedIn who specifically help military members and their spouses find jobs and opportunities. And of course, follow people who interest you. If you're not on LinkedIn and you don't know what to post about, don't start with posting. Just start with following other people, engaging with their content. You can, write a comment on someone's post if you're feeling like you don't want to post anything on your LinkedIn. That's a good way to kind of step into the waters. But if you have any other questions about LinkedIn, I am definitely your go-to person, and you can find me on LinkedIn, just my name, Miranda Head.
That's awesome. We'll definitely put those 3 top recommendations of people to follow in the show notes so people can find those. Miranda Head on LinkedIn is a great resource, and she has all kinds of interesting things in there, as well as her experience of going from periods of working as a teacher to stay-at-home mom to freelancer to TikTok famous to now full-time employee at LinkedIn and in charge of managing a team. And she's way cooler than her husband now. Had to make sure I get a plug for that. So we're super honored to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's been really fun. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them on LinkedIn.
Thanks again to Miranda Head for joining us on the podcast. You can find her on LinkedIn. Just search Miranda Head, Head. And you can leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts if you got value out of this podcast. If you want to reach out to me or Jamie, podcast@militarymoneymanual.com is the email. And on Instagram, we're at Military Money Manual. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Military Money Manual podcast.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Military Money Manual podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
This episode is brought to you by my favorite military personal finance book, The Military Money Manual, a practical guide to financial freedom, written by our very own Spencer Reese.
That's right, Jamie. I wrote this book because I wish someone had handed me a book like this on my first day in the military. There were no personal finance books written specifically for military service members. So I decided to change that and write the book. In this book, I explain the exact money tactics and investing strategies that enabled me to achieve financial independence while I served in the U.S. Air Force.
So Spencer, who is this book for?
If you're in the military, and we're talking about Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, Marines, whether you're active duty, Guard, Reserve, enlisted, officer, a military spouse, a cadet, it doesn't matter which branch of the armed forces you are in. I wrote this book specifically for you. In addition, any ROTC or Academy cadet or midshipman would also benefit from the game plan for financial success that I lay out in the book.
With dozens of 5-star reviews on Amazon and hundreds of happy readers, it's no wonder that the Military Money Manual was selected by the U.S. Air Force Academy Association of Graduates as a parting gift for the class of 2023. Ryan from Goodreads.com says, the most comprehensive investing personal finance book written specifically for military members I've read so far. This book should be handed to every new lieutenant at commissioning. On Amazon.com, Matt reviewed, this book should be on the Commandant's reading list. And lastly, Jonathan on Amazon said, this is the book I wish I read when I joined.
The Military Money Manual is available on Amazon, Audible, and my website in hardcover, paperback, ebook, Kindle, and audiobook. Podcast listeners are eligible for a special discount by using promo code PODCAST when you purchase the Military Money Manual on shop.militarymoneymanual.com.
Again, that's the Military Money Manual, available on Amazon and shop.militarymoneymanual.com with promo code PODCAST. The views and opinions presented here are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of the DoD or its components. Reference to any commercial products or services does not constitute DoD endorsement of those products or services.